Hey guys, just wrapped up week 3 of Grandmasters season 3, and this week we had a bit of a wackier format. We were able to play well, not all, but we were able to submit 10 decks, one for each class, where we have 6 bands, blind bands at the start. There's no pick band phase, and then we have 4 classes left. But from those 4 classes, we have to win with 3 of them, so it's still best of 5, which means we don't have to play all 4 of the classes that are left up, which leads to a bit of an interesting dynamic. It's a little less complex because we didn't have an alternating pick ban stage. If we were to ban one and then kind of pick one that we'd pick a class that we'd like to hold on to, we would see probably a much different strategy that people would have gone for. But with the blind 6 bans, the kind of strategy that pretty much almost everyone went for was just bring the 4 weak classes in a more of an aggressive sort of lineup. And by the 4 weakest classes, I mean Paladin, Shaman, and then you could go a few different ways based on what you want to leave up, but most people are leaving up Druid and then Hunter. Every now and then some people will be leaving up a different 4th class instead of Hunter, but I think that was the majority of the bans for most people this week, at least in Americas. I think in Europe and Asia, we saw a few different strategies, but they still kind of all revolved around the same thing, expecting to leave 3 or 4 of those classes up. So let's hop in and kind of explain what decks I chose and why I picked some specific cards in each of these decks. I'll start off with the good classes, the classes that almost everyone's banning, so we don't expect to play at all. First up, we have Warrior. Pretty standard Egg Warrior list. I included a sticky finger in case we end up, not in case we end up seeing mirrors, but a lot of the classes left over, Paladin, Shaman, and Hunter, are going to have weapons. So the sticky finger in those matchups would be nice if this were to be left up, which I didn't expect it to be left up, and it wasn't left up in any single round. But the Warrior was good enough that I didn't think you needed any tech cards if it were to be left up. So I'm not going to spend too long on that. Go for Rogue. Pretty standard 4 secret list with Blackjack Stunners. Same thing. Rogue's pretty solid. I didn't think there was a need for many tech cards in this. If this were to be left up, it would probably just get a win. And you can already see, as I'm going through the good list, there'll be a bit of, well, I didn't need to tech much because it will be banned, and if it wasn't banned, then it's strong enough that it'll win anyways. And because of the way the format was set up this week with 6 blind bans, it was kind of expected that most of the classes that we've seen for a while in the past couple of weeks are going to be banned. Let's go Warlock. Pretty standard Galacon Warlock. I have an inclusion of an Ooze. I have the Rain of Fire techs. Good anti-aggro stuff that I expect would be good against Murloc Paladin or Evolve Shaman or Totem Shaman. Stuff that I expect people to bring with the weaker classes. Unsurprisingly, this was also not banned. Sorry, this was also banned. But there's nothing too fancy in this list. Now my mage list, I teched a lot of cards in here to try and be better against aggro. I thought some people might leave mage up. You'll see I've included Ooze, I've included Frostbolt, Mysteries with a barrier and a Flame Ward to help clean up some early stuff with some defensive options. Imprisoned Observer as well to help deal with the board a little bit early. I ended up not including CMAT. There's still some top end here because you still do need to win the game, but there's a lot of good defensive tools I've included as well. Notably, I didn't include Zephyrus, not because I was trying to mind games people, but because I forgot. But still, even without the Zephyrus, I don't think people noticed that I didn't have Zephyrus, but Mage was kind of banned too. Which also is kind of an interesting point. If people had noticed that I wasn't bringing Zephyrus, I think maybe they would have left it up a little bit. However, because of the way the format's set up, when we have 10 deck lists to look through, it's kind of hard to find and pinpoint, all 300 cards that you're looking for through each list. You're not double checking to make sure people omitted good cards. You're double checking to see what kind of archetype it is and then write it off based on what strategy you had prepared. So I imagine people glossed over my mage and didn't even notice there was Zephyrus missing, which fortunately for me, it would have been nice not to have this left. It would have been nice to not have to play this after I realized that I missed Zephyrus. But yeah, this didn't see a single game. Priest was left up a little. Let's go for Demon Hunter first. Pretty standard list. This might be the exact same 30 cards I submitted last week. Kind of the same thing. The deck's really good. The class is really good, so I didn't see a reason to change too many cards up, because if someone's leaving up Demon Hunter, I can't even imagine what kind of strategy they'd be using, so the standard list would probably just be enough to get a win in that way. Now we've gone through Warrior, Rogue, Warlock, Mage, and Demon Hunter. So we have 5 classes left, and now we're getting to the point where people might leave some specific classes up based on their strategy. Priest was left up, I think, twice in my lineup, or maybe once, but it was still banned for the most part. I expected Druid. Well, not expected. I of course you expect every single class in a 10 class format. I was leaving up Druid, Shaman, Paladin, and Hunter for the most part. Every now and then I might switch a little bit based on their exact lists and the cards they have included. But with leaving those up, I think including a bunch of AoE and single target removal, smites, penances to help deal with early minions from, say, a Murloc Paladin or even a Totem Shaman. Mass Dispel can help with the Totem Shaman as well, but I want to make sure that the Priest, if it's left up, it just barrels through any of the aggro decks. And the Mass Dispels would help against Druid as well. I am not including Plague of Deaths, because those are a little slow against the other matchups, the Paladins and the Shamans, and even the Hunters as well to some extent, depending on the Hunter list. And to make up for not having the Plague of Deaths to help for Druid, I included a couple Mass Dispels, which can help against some other decks as well, but mostly not the Druid, because I was planning on leaving that up and trying to beat that out. All right, 6 down. Now we have 4 more to go. Now we're getting to the classes that are kind of weaker because they just don't have the support to kind of be as strong as the other classes do. Let's start with Shaman. So Shaman, I opted to go for a Jombre style build where we're doing Evolve stuff, Bogspine Knuckles, we have Dread Corsairs, Desert Hares, Bogstar Clackers. We even see Mogul Flesh Shippers and Mutates. So we're trying to make a big tempo swing on the board, make a huge Evolve board, and then win from there. Now this isn't going to work against a lot of the good classes, which is to be expected, but against some of the other lower tier classes, this swing is generally good enough to kind of win the game. Not always, because, you know, Zephyr still exists in some of the Highlander decks people are bringing. We saw some Highlander Paladin and Highlander Hunter. So the swings can be dealt with, but the idea is that it's difficult to be dealt with, so most of the time you just win off the bat of that. Off the something of that, whatever. Same thing. I'm leaving Druid up. I don't want to get blown out by a Glowfly Swarm. Because of that, I included a couple of Lightning Storms. I have some Evil Totems for some early sort of something to do with my mana, because there weren't that many cards I could think of to include. I did see a lot of people ended up running Battle Mages, and I think Blazing Battle Mages, the 1-mana 2/2s, would have been a good addition to this. But in my prep, I didn't come across that, and it didn't occur to me to include that. I have a Lightning Bolt as well, a little bit more single target, and a tiny bit of reach. Otherwise, it's pretty close to what Jombre Shaman was a little while ago after the expansion came out. Lurker Below as well helps a lot against all the Murloc decks. It helps in the Mirror too and against Druid, so I thought the Lurker Below was a nice little inclusion, which may not be always run in the standard Jombre Shaman list. But this deck performed pretty well, as well as could be imagined. My ending score was, I think, 2-5 in Swiss, so I didn't do too well. My prep this week felt a little worse than the other weeks. I wasn't really quite in my element because the only viable decks you could really make out of the 4-week classes outside of Druid were kind of more aggressive archetypes, which I don't have that much experience in. I still kind of know how to play them, but it felt like a lot of matches were decided by a lot of games were decided by turn 4 and 5. It was just who can curve out better, who has the power cards as fast as possible, which felt really unfun and unattractive, which was kind of a downside of this format. I think playing 10 different, or having the option to play 10 different classes would be pretty cool, but with 6 blind bands, it was kind of very repetitive how each match was going on, which is kind of frustrating. I think with a bit more time, some archetypes could be explored to allow us to make a different strategy. And what I mean by that is with 2 days to prep 10 different decks, some of them, all right, you can already write off. You just bring some of the good decks like Warrior, Demon Hunter, so on. But I feel with, you know, an extra few days to work with, if there might have been enough time to practice and maybe try to find a sort of mid-rangier or control-y Paladin and Shaman deck, which would allow you to leave up some of the good control decks and then try to target those instead of leaving up just the standard Shaman, Paladin, etc. Because if you see some other people making, for example, a less greedier Priest, and you can have a greedier control deck with Shaman or Paladin to kind of beat that out, you can now leave up priest, and you have a few more options in terms of what you can leave up. Obviously, that's easier said than done, and maybe a few more days might not have helped that. But I feel like with the limited time we had, a lot of people just fell on the same strategy of making just aggro or even mid-range decks. We saw some Highlander paladins and hunters hanging around too, which again kind of is makes the games very polarized based on who draws. First of all, who goes first in aggro mirrors, but also who draws their power cards. You know, Zephyrus, Dragon Queen Alex less so because the games end a lot quicker than that more often. But it was kind of a weird format. It was kind of wacky. All right, what decks do I have left that I was supposed to talk about? Druid and Hunter and Paladin. Not too creative. I tested a little bit with Highlander Paladin, and it felt a little meh to me. Not to say that this felt that much better, but I felt like this could just steal away games with a pretty good curve, especially if you happen to be on the play. Pretty much Murloc package. I included Shotbot because it's a pretty good card. There's one Blessing of Kings, a Consecration as well to help against Druids. Generally, you're aggro enough to kill Druids anyways, but if they happen to get an early Glowfly Storm out with an Innervate on coin, I felt like Consecration could kind of help. Or if you can't quite finish the game out fast enough, they do get a board out. The Consecration can help you not lose your board advantage, and it helps against in the mirror and against some Shaman decks as well, just to help clean up some of the boards that you can't really come back with once you've lost the board. So I felt like a 1-up Consecration was fine. Hand of Adal ended up feeling really good, mostly because it's one of the only card draws in the deck. So it's a little bit of a refill, but it's also a decent buff. This deck didn't feel too great to play, honestly. The Angling Rod is really good as well, though. Kind of regret, I feel like I should have had maybe one more weapon in here, but I wasn't quite sure how to build the list. And again, there wasn't that much time to practice all the archetypes that I wanted to bring. Next up, we have the Druid. I expect the Druid to be left up a lot based on people's strategies. So because of that, I cut out some top end. You'll see from last week, I cut Ysera, which I felt was way too greedy for this meta, or this week's meta in Grandmasters. I also cut another Soul of the Forest and a Rising Winds. I wanted to add 2 Bees, and I have the Wraths back in here as well, just to make sure I can get to my late game plan more consistently and deal with the early aggression that people might have, either with Totem Shaman or Murloc Paladin, or even against Hunters that leave it up as well. Some of the early removal really helps you get to the turns where you can Overgrowth, get out Exotic Mound Sellers, and kind of play the game out from there. The Druid ended up performing pretty well as well, but I mean that's just because the power level of Druid is still kind of strong. Sometimes you just get the Fungal Fortunes, Overgrowth, Glowfly Storm openings, or into Mount Seller and the Zero Mana stuff. It's just the power level is pretty high. So even with people targeting this, I feel like Druid did find some wins, not just personally for myself, but for other people as well. And finally, the Hunter deck I brought was not Highlander. It was Dragon Aggro? I don't remember what it's called, but Dragon Hunter, basically. Got your 1-drops, a couple of secrets, the inclusion of Scavenger's Ingenuity with the expansion coming out. We have Porcupines to help with the Ingenuity. We have the Face Stalkers, which works with that as well. Zixor as the final beast. Enough of dragons to kind of make sure you have Stormhammer and Corrosive Breath utilization. I didn't include trackings here. I felt a little conflicted on this. Again, I didn't have that many games in on every single archetype because it was kind of hard getting everything set up together. But I didn't have trackings. I just focused on having as good of a curve as I can and then just playing the game out from there. I have Scale Riders, which might not have been the best inclusion, but it ended up being okay, honestly. I thought against something like Murloc Paladin, it could help fight for the board a bit. It is a little bit of reach as well. That being said, tracking is very useful. So if I went back and rebuilt this, I probably would include a tracking or two. But yeah, kind of to summarize, the meta was expected to be quite aggro this week with the 4 classes that people were most likely going to leave up. So you wanted to tech some of the decks that you were scared of being left up to be a bit more anti-aggro. And in your own aggro decks, you might want to include some tech cards, maybe some weapon removal, which I don't think most people did. What most people did was include a couple of crabs. You'll notice I didn't put any Hunger Crabs in my lists. I don't know. I don't like polarizing cards and formats, and maybe I should have included it to kind of help me in that sort of sense. If people are trying to queue up Murloc Paladin, maybe I should just have crabs in every single deck, but it felt kind of weird to me, so I didn't. But yeah, this meta was aggro, Murlocs, crabs, and just kind of blow out your opponent as fast as possible. The matches were done very, very quickly. I think about half my matches were done in 20-25 minutes flat, It's just the games are over so quickly. It was insane. So I'm happy that this week's over. Now we get to switch back to a more normal format. I think if we revisit this format in the future, it could be pretty fun. But I think we might need to mix it up and have a sort of pick ban phase where we are able to use some of the better classes instead of being limited to only, you know, Shaman, Paladin, and then some of the weak classes that are left over. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. That's my week 3 analysis on my lineup. Not too much to talk about, honestly. I think the format was kind of straightforward with how much time we had to put into it. But some people did come up with pretty interesting lineups, and I'd recommend going to check out some of the other Grandmasters on Twitter and seeing what they submitted. Yeah, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and Twitch, where I stream. Otherwise, you'll find the deck codes below, and hope to see you guys next week.